sometimes sibling conflict isn't equal. Where one sibling is protected, the others are expected to tolerate a lot more. And over time, this creates something very specific: sibling entitlement. This is Rianne's unpopular opinions on healing. Let's unpack it. Am I the a-hole for refusing to swap rooms with my sister after I fixed mine up? OP tells us that she is 24 years old and recently moved back home in order to be able to save money to afford her own place. However, the only space that was available was a small, dilapidated side room that had like the wallpaper falling off the walls, no lighting, a dodgy door. However, she realised this was her best option and, she was going to be there for about a year, so decided that it was worth her time, money and energy to fix it up. She created this space that she was very happy with. And the moment that her sister saw this, her younger sister, who's about 21, she was like, well, let's swap. OP very rightly said, no way, it's my space. I have put my time, energy and money into it. And her sister continued with, well, my room gets really hot and yours is really cool. We definitely need to swap. Plus, this is the family house. It's not yours. So therefore, I should still be entitled to have this space. To which OP is keeping her foot firm and saying, no way. However, she is asking us, am I the a-hole in this situation? Now, let's slow it down. I think OP sees very clearly what is happening, that her sister wants to take over her space, the space that she not only put her time and energy into, but her money. Okay, she knows that she's in this position because she wants to save it up. So money is very tight. Her budget is very small, but she was able to put it into this space to create something that she wanted. And her sister is completely disregarding that and prioritizing her own wants and needs. Now, we often see this when we are looking at sibling entitlement. I think this could be quite obvious and quite clear to a lot of us. It's in the title. That's what the whole story is about. However, as with a majority of emotional patterns, the true connotations and underlying themes aren't always very obvious. So let's take a little closer look at sibling entitlement. Sibling entitlement often stems from childhood dynamics. We're looking quite closely at parental favoritism, the golden child. We're also looking at overindulgence and conversely, the need to make up for neglect. Now, remember, neglect isn't just that dirty, unfed child, which we know could be true for a lot of us. However, it's also the lack of time and energy, that parents not having that emotional capacity to care for their children. And I think that's quite important when it comes into a lot of family dynamics, when people might go, oh, they were a nice put together family, weren't they? From the outside, but from the inside, we know it can be quite different. Now, we can also look at the lens of sibling entitlement, because it can also stem from behavioural issues where one of the children has challenging behaviour, which is, it could be anything. That's a really broad spectrum as well. However, that challenging behaviour can be met with, more flexibility, more blind eye to negative behaviours because, the parents don't know how to deal with it. Now, what is quite important is sibling entitlement is an environment created by adults, okay? Because we have leading parents, we have leading adults in our lives. So the behaviours that were in that home were a direct reflection to the way in which our parents or leading adults navigated that, okay? So that's something that we have to remember. Now, we can see with entitled siblings a number of things, namely invalidation of others' realities. So that includes dismissing and minimalizing other people's experiences, feelings, boundaries of the brothers and sisters. We are also seeing the rewriting of history, of past family events to make themselves look better or justify current behaviors. How many of us have heard, you always used to get, first choice, so now it's my turn to be the first to choose. Dismissing of others' pain. So there's no regard for the siblings that may have endured more pain, hardship or trauma at the hands of their parents. And again, we know that can be big or small. And I do think it's important. And I know I say a lot in my videos, but I want to make sure everyone feels seen, because we know that trauma, we know that hardship and challenges, they look all different, and what I might have experienced is, it doesn't mean it's more than what you experienced, because my experience was louder, if that makes sense. I want everyone to feel heard and seen. Entitled siblings often oscillate between acting superior, more deserving, or as the golden child, then the victim to avoid accountability of those actions from that other behavior. They may believe that they are more naturally deserving of parental attention, resources, or more entitled to things like, inheritance. And they rarely take responsibility for the behaviors that they show, because then they can manipulate those situations to make themselves the victim. We can see that directly with OP's story. Her sister, the moment she sees that OP has created something beautiful, hey, I'm entitled to that because, my room is really hot and this is our house. And not only is she deciding that, she's more deserved of that space, she's also dismissing the fact that, she says that her room is really hot and shows absolutely no regard that if her sister goes into her room, she will be hot. She doesn't really care though, does she? No, she has that entitlement. She's entitled to that space and has no regard for anyone else other than herself. And that brings us to emotional manipulation. We've just seen it. I know I'm pointing up, but what I was just saying, we've just seen the emotional manipulation. OP's sister is guilt tripping her into swapping and giving her space. And, making her feel responsible for her problems. And it's got nothing to do with OP, has it? But this is a tactic, and it is a tactic when we're looking at manipulative behaviours, to make the other person, to make the sibling in this case, feel bad and go, well, okay then, all right, even though it's not in their favour. Despite being the more favoured or pampered, cared for child, they can show jealousy over their siblings receiving attention. So rather than OP's sister celebrating her achievement of, being on such a tight budget and making this really beautiful, her sister is finding a problem with it. She is jealous, and look, now she's going to get all this attention for achieving something really wonderful, and she can't support it because it's not about her. Sibling entitlement is actually sibling bullying. Now, we don't want to look at bullying only through the lens of being physically hurt and having your things taken away. We know that that is true for a lot of us. But bullying is also that manipulative behaviour that we've just been talking about. It's the gaslighting, the coercive control. And it's really important that we see things for what they actually are, because that is what then allows us to start making that path forward and not getting stuck in those patterns. The environment in the home is the responsibility of the parents, okay? So this type of behaviour between siblings is enabled by parents, because inaction is an action in itself, isn't it? Me turning my head this way and something going on over there, turning the blind eye, it doesn't stop what's going on there. It doesn't stop my responsibility to be that parent to say, hey, what's going on, to address it. So we are actually calling our parents in this position the enablers of said behaviour, because it is being allowed. What's also important, and a true reflection on the parents' behaviours, is that the world doesn't revolve around one child when you have got multiple, okay? So when there's more than one kid, it can't all be this child on a pedestal and these children down there. It's not hidden behaviour, right? Now, these dynamics are not only seen when we are children. It is something that, if it started at a young age, it's going to keep going up until you're adults, okay? And this is the reason why a lot of us may be estranged from not only the bullying sibling, but also the enabling parents, because as you get older, you start really seeing it for what it is. It's unfair. It's not right. And even if it's those small things that, your sibling always gets to have the first choice. They always get to have, the new clothes, and then the budget dwindles and you don't get anything, or you get the rubbish version when they always get the nice one. We have to remember, it's, as I say all the time, it's not the big things, it can be those small things. But as always, discomfort isn't failure, it's information. And you feel it, even as a child. Doesn't matter what's going on in your life, you know that discomfort, you know what's happening. Now, the emotional toll of growing up with a bullying sibling can be devastating. It can be really life-changing. It can be very, very difficult to comprehend and understand. Because when we have grown up in such a hostile environment, we will see things like damaged self-esteem, chronic anxiety and fear of judgment, difficulty in making boundaries, feelings of isolation and alienation, strained relationships with your family. What can make it challenging is often family members minimize or dismiss the impact of sibling bullying, because siblings are supposed to be a unit. You're meant to be close, growing up together, learning from each other, affectionate. So when that's not present, it brings up questions on parenting. What happened? What was that home life like? And that would lead to accountability. And a lot of people aren't even aware that that's something that they should be doing, not something that they are even interested in. Every emotional pattern has a loop. The thing that keeps us in the space that we do not want to be in, that keeps that cycle going round and round. So today we are looking through the lens of sibling bullying. So one, it starts up here. We have got rigid roles. We've got the perpetrator and we've got the victim, and they do not interchange. They are rigid. That goes down to two, down here. Normalization by parents. So the parents turn a blind eye and dust it off as normal rivalry or just kids being kids fighting, which acts as a second wound for the victim, because hey, my parents are not even standing up for me or helping me. And then that fuels the perpetrator. Hey, my parents ain't looking at this. This is fine. That then takes us down to three, down here. The no safe haven. When a child is bullied at school, for example, they can go home and they can have that quiet, peaceful, safe space. But when it's happening at home, there is nowhere for that kid to go. So that is a scary place to be. That takes us up to 4, up here. That's escalation. Over time, this behavior worsens. The younger, smaller, less socially skilled are targeted. Because remember, go back over here, it's been normalized. Parents turn a blind eye. They are not helping out in this situation. And then we get up to here, 5. The re-victimization loop. The victim develops submissive, accommodating, or people-pleasing behaviors that they then carry with them into adulthood. And this becomes reflective in their relationships, which leads into another cycle of victimization, because they've already learned this from a child, that they've got no safe space, that they haven't got anyone to stand up for them. So then it becomes something that not necessarily is natural, but feels very used to. And then that opens the gate to a whole host of other types of bullying, other types of coercive, manipulative, and abusive behaviors. I can see why some people would act like this. It's always been like that, right? It's your family. It's always been downplayed. However, there needs to be a critical shift from normalizing the behavior to just rivalry, to recognizing it as harmful, often abusive pattern that requires intervention. And you are that intervention, okay? So this may be something that's gone on throughout your whole childhood, and as an adult, you've still got that dynamic. But your awareness and your accountability is that intervention, is that cutting that cycle. That brings us to a point of reflection. So as always, I have split it into 2 parts. The first one, have a look down in the description box. I have put a self-reflective practice for you to spend some time with. It is called the internal parent method. So spend a little bit of time down there and see what that brings up. 2, I've got some questions for you to sit with, explore, and see what it brings up. So 1, what are 3 things I genuinely like about myself? 2, is my self-worth currently tied to a specific person, job, or outcome? 3, what is the bravest thing that I can do for myself today, even if it's small? 4, what lessons can I learn from my most recent failure? Healing isn't about being perfect. It's about awareness of what drives it. So if the pattern today resonated, sit with it gently. So until the next reflection, I hear you, I see you, and I feel you. Bottoms up.